Okay, here's example 4 from section 4.1. It gives us a graph of the function of 3x to the fourth minus 16x cubed plus 18x squared on the interval from -1 to 4. And it asks us to identify any local extrema or absolute extrema. So looking at the graph, I've first noticed that I have a couple of different relative extrema, humps on my graph. I also noticed that I have two different endpoints, one at x equals -1 and one at x equals 4. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take those, what is that, 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, and I would like you to tell me if you think they're relative or local extrema, or an absolute extrema. And then give me a value of what is the local extrema or absolute extrema. So looking at f of -1, we got a y value of 37. At f of 0, if I plug in a 0, I get 0. At f of 1, it says the y value is 5. At f of 3, it says the y value is -27. And at f of 4, it doesn't really give me a value, but I could find the value when x is 4 by plugging in a 4 into my original function, if we needed to do that. Okay, so you can do that and find a value for f of 4 if you needed to. Now looking at those values, if I didn't have a picture with me and I have those values, would we be able to use these values to figure out if there's a relative or local extrema or an absolute extrema? Well, it looks like from my y values, don't I have the very, very, very highest point at -1, 37. The absolute maximum value is 37. It happens when x is -1. And then I could actually go over here to the picture and see that it is going to be the highest value on my graph. Now, x equals 4 could have been a place where I had an absolute maximum. I would have to plug that 4 in and see. But looking at the picture, it doesn't look like it's the highest point. And so I'm going to call 37 my absolute maximum. At x equals 0, there, it is not the lowest point, but it is a relative minimum. At x equals 1, it looks like that's not the highest point, but a relative maximum. So I have a relative maximum when x is 1. The relative maximum is 5. It looks like at the point 3, -27, there is an absolute minimum when x is 3. That absolute minimum is -27. And then at x equals 4, remember we can plug it in and get a value, but by looking at my picture, to me it's not the highest point, and so is he a local or relative maximum? Nah, be careful, because you don't know what's going on that other side. You can't necessarily say that that is a relative maximum. He's not an absolute maximum, so we're going to call that endpoint a neither. So kind of another example of when it might be neither. Again, remember that endpoints can only be absolute